Hello and welcome. We are thrilled to have you here with us today on Frenchly. Moving to France isn't just about packing boxes, it's about unpacking a whole new life. I love this title. Relocating to France is more than just a change of address, it's a complete lifestyle shift, and getting it right means understanding far more than just logistics. Today's session is here to help you prepare for that bigger picture, whether you're planning a permanent move, exploring a dual residency, or simply curious about the possibilities. This webinar will provide practical guidance from professionals who know the process inside and out. Together, we'll cover the essentials like securing the right visa, accessing healthcare, working or setting up a business in France, managing currency exchange, navigating cross-border tax obligations, and even your pathway to French citizenship. We will also discuss the most common mistakes people make and how to avoid them. We're joined by three fantastic experts today. Phil Rees from Peter Johnson. Phil is a British entrepreneur who's built a successful life in France and now helps others create realistic, coherent plans for doing the same. Joshua Baxter is with us, a currency specialist at Magna Financial, helping clients manage international transfers, especially when buying property or relocating. And Joel Hagler, we say Joel in French, I would say Joel Hagler, a New York-based CPA who supports American citizens and green card holders in meeting their US tax obligations while living abroad. Of course, you will be able to ask questions live during this session, and I will be very happy to ask them to our experts after their presentation. Don't hesitate to engage. Let's dive in and start unpacking these boxes and see what your new life in France could look like. Phil, the floor is yours, as they say.
Oh, that's nice, Frankie. I mean, last time we spoke, you were having a terrible time in LA with fires. So is life better for you over there
Much
now?
better. I remember that period of time that was quite kind of very different from usual, and hopefully things are getting back in place. And I appreciate you asking. Thank you so much.
That's okay. Well, I've been traveling in ironically traveling in England over the past few days. So it seems that none of us here are in France as we speak for this moving to France. So, but I can't wait to get back to French life
How long have
very
you
soon.
been in, how long have you been living in France?
Up to about year number 14 now. So, it's
14
a
years.
long time. So, yeah, seems like a lifetime. But yeah. Okay. Well, my name's Phil Rees. I'm from Peter Johnson Sale, and I've been living in France for 14 years. And as almost a foreigner myself coming over, I've kind of learnt the process of what it's like to move into France. And then my French wife, we brought our two kids. So not only do we have the real life experience, but we've got kind of the technical experience of getting our qualifications and understanding the practicalities of moving into France. So what Peter Johnson does, it's been going for 30 years now. It helps people join the dots up so they can get into France in quite a smooth way. And so there's various areas that we cover, and the team that we've got behind us is from different backgrounds. We've got a lady who's American. We've got myself, who's a Brit, Chris, who's a Brit, and Sophie, who's French. So we use a team of 5 of us based around France in order to help people get into France and use our sort of real life experience to do that. So not only are we sort of qualified, but we have a number of partners that we work with to help people through the system. One of those is a French chartered accountant who helps our business clients. And then we've got other people who are lawyers, They may help with wealth management before you come to France. And we've got people like Joshua at at Magna Financial, and then Joel. We share a lot of clients who are both declaring taxes in France and the US. So when you're looking at coming to France, then there's a number of different areas that you need to join up. One is visas. That's your first step. And with that, you need to get visa compliant health insurance. Then when you're in France for health, you need to get a mutuelle, which is like a top-up insurance. Then once you're in the French healthcare system, you need a tax declaration done. Maybe you're going to work in France, so you need a working status as well. Maybe you're going to set up a French business. So that's another area where you need to lock it into how you plan your life in France. Other things like driving licenses, maybe one day getting French nationality. And there's a number of other administration systems that need to be, perhaps for you, engaged with in order to help your life in France. So this is where we start to come in, is putting those dots together. So whether you come in via visa and you're retired, or you come in and you're working here, you need to, have the tax, you need to have the healthcare, and possibly one day you need to have the nationality to go with it. Looking at the first step, which is visas, then yes, you do need a visa. If you're active or retired, if you're non-active, so you're here not working, but you're not yet retired, or you're officially retired, having a pension, or are you going to be working in France? Do you have a particular skill? Then you need a certain type of visa. If you're coming here and your US company is posting you here, well, they do all that work for you. So you can get different types of visas. So you need to check which one you need, whether it's a VLSTS, where you can renew online, or whether you're going to apply for a renewal of a visa for, a 5 or 10-year residency card. So when you're applying for visas, then they're looking for, what your financial resources are, or, whether you've got a particular skill. And then to get that visa, you've got to have compliant healthcare insurance when you go for that application. So lots to kind of tie together. You may need to think about, what your plan is for France. Are you going to come here, try it for a year, and then settle? So it's good to think about, okay, I need a visa that can be renewed, that I don't have to go back for the US for. So you need to start thinking about, okay, what's my plan here? If you get the wrong visa to start off with, then it might mean you've got to go back to the US, reapply on US soil to get your next visa. So when you're here and you've got that first visa, then you think, oh, I like it, I'm staying. I start getting into the healthcare system, the tax system. So then you need to think about renewal. And after your first renewal, that doesn't need too much evidence. But when you get to second or third renewal, they expect to see a French tax statement. So this is where you start to plan, and that's what we can help you with. So visas, in terms of what they do for you, you can either have the tourist visa, or when it comes to a working visa, when you're going to be self-employed here or have your own company, then it's a bit more detailed, and you've got to get the right visa. Okay, like a profession libéral visa. It's like a self-employment visa. So there are many, but strictly it's either about being non-active or it's about working. There are other visas for other types of work, which are not used too often, but they're possibilities. So then what you've got to think about is that if you're coming here to work, then having the right to live here and having the right to work here are two separate issues. So in our experience, you've got to make sure that you're clear about your goals at the start. And what we can do from a planning point of view is say, okay, what's your plan here? And you need to go and get the right visa in order to make sure that you comply with, the social security and the tax law in France. So when you're talking about a working status, you're coming here to work in France, and we've got a lot of American clients that are coming here and they want to have a little self-employed setup. Yeah, sometimes there's a bit of a conflict between what happens in terms of how you work in France. So most US citizens come here, they start working here at distance, and all their clients are based in the US. Well, what's important to remember overall is that where you physically work determines where you pay your social security and your income tax. So it's about territory. Even if all your clients are based in the US, okay, because you're working on French soil, then that's where you need to pay your social security and your income tax. There can be a situation where it's a bit more hybrid and you go back to the US to do some work and you do some work on French soil. And in that case, sometimes you can declare some working tax in the US. So, putting work to one side, if you want to come to France, okay, how do you get into the healthcare system? Well, you do that by living here for 3 consecutive months, okay? And if you do that, that is one way of applying to get into the French healthcare system. If you come here and you start a work activity, then that's how you're going to get into the French healthcare system. Europeans have a different way of getting in. So what you have to be aware of is what's your route into the French healthcare system. Is it that you're entitled to it for living here? Is it because you're working, or is it because you're a European citizen? So there's different ways of getting in to end up with that magic carte vitale, which gets you into that French healthcare system. For living in France, for Americans, then, taxing is quite important. And the principle behind French tax is that you declare all your worldwide income, no matter where it is. So generally, US income is not taxed in France. You have to be careful with sort of alimony or divorce payments. That's a slight vague grey area. But if you've got any French working income, that has to be declared back in the US. However, your regular US pensions, even self-employment, dividends, interest, capital gains and rental is all declared in France, but it's not taxed. If you've got real estate in the US and that tips you over the wealth tax limit of 1.3 million, then you've got a 5-year grace period before you pay wealth tax on your worldwide real estate. If you happen to have worked in France and you get a French pension, not a very common situation, but that could cause a problem with being taxed on some US pensions. But each situation needs to be looked at individually. However, this is the general rule. US income generally is not taxed in France. However, that US income, if you do work in France, will contribute to your tax rate. So you may be a self-employed person in France and you've earned so much, and then you've got 100,000 worth of US income. That 100,000 worth of US income will push your tax rate up. So, we're covering lots of different dots that we need to join up, and that's our job. So, this time frame gives you an idea. If you were to come to France in, March 25, you get your visa, you arrive. After 3 months, you can apply for a carte vitale. And then by December that year, you probably get your carte vitale, get your social security number, and then you can get a mutuelle. April 26th, that's when you can make your first tax declaration. And then July, August, September, you'll then receive your first tax statement with a numéro fiscal, a French tax number. So there's a certain pattern of getting in, and, it's not always logical. Things aren't logical in France. And, you get your social security number before you get your tax number. So you're in limbo a little bit for the first 18 months as all these things join up together. So inheritance is another thing that Americans worry about when they're coming to locate in France. It is, a slightly complicated area. And so you need to take the right advice, not just from someone like me, but maybe a wealth management specialist in the US, because there's a number of rules regarding the number of years you live in France. Passing estates between spouses is fine, 0, but your worldwide estate can be taxed. And there is an estate treaty between the two countries, and they both have taxing rights. It so happens that I think the US limit is a lot higher than the French limit. So the French will come in and tax your worldwide estate. Trusts is another area which is a bit tricky because the French don't recognize them. So if you have a trust, then you need to make sure that that is handled properly, before you move to France or when you've moved. So it's important to make sure that you take the right advice of the right specialists, and that's why we have partners who work together. If you are thinking about coming here and working, then we have a system called an auto entrepreneur. It's quite a simplified, self-employment status, and you register for a business. You register yourself as a self-employed person rather than as a complete legal entity. You get your carte vitale, you get taxed social security on the gross, you get taxed, at a certain tax band for your income tax, and then you pay a little local business tax called a CFE. And then we were just talking about within the tax section how US income determines your tax rate. So if your plan is to come here, work as a consultant with all online clients, then you could declare, say, 40,000 in your auto entrepreneur account. You'd have a tax rate of 5.8%. But then if you had another additional 50K in US income, your tax rate may go up to 20%. So it's an example of just to say that, you may only earn 10,000 a year as a self-employed person in France, but your tax rate may be pushed up on that 10,000 by your US income. So a couple of things that came out of the tax filing this year. We call it a vague in French, a wave of Americans coming over to France. And this year, we've had, even more people go through the system. And one of the things I've noticed is that they've been stricter on the definition of becoming a tax resident. So one of the things you need to think about and plan with us is when you start your tax residency, and that you're putting the right things in place to qualify as a tax resident, because they come back to a specific article in the treaty that talks about whether you have your centre of economic interests in France or the US, how long have you actually lived here in your first tax year, and is France your regular place where you're living? So it's been more of an issue this year, so it just needs to be thought about a little bit more. And the final point is that I also noticed this year that Americans coming over here, renting a property for a first year, which is furnished, have been a little bit caught out with the local property tax called taxe d'habitation. So again, you need some clear guidance on if that could apply to you and how it would happen, so you can organise that with any landlord you might be having a contract with. So, this is what we've tried to do. Very sort of in summary, briefly, I think this is about, educating, you on that there's different dots to join together. And the sooner you come and see us at the beginning of your journey, then the better we can either advise you who to go and see or have the right sort of plan. So there's no surprises when you come here. You get through the system in the smoothest possible way. And, you understand, and your expectations are managed in the sense that sometimes it can be a bumpy ride getting into the French tax system, but we get there eventually. So, that's our scope in terms of sort of visa, healthcare, French tax, working scenarios, and being there by your side as, we get into the French tax system. So hopefully that adds a little bit of more background to what you need to think about when you start coming to France.
Yes, it absolutely does. Thank you, Phil, for all the insights. As you said, moving to France it's logistics, it's checklists, it's a process, and it's about creating that realistic plan to avoid, as you said, surprises. And it's also a mindset for a new way of life. So when that vision starts to take shape, one of the biggest practical challenges comes into play. and that's money, money, money. From buying a property to transferring savings or managing your income actually between two countries, exchange rates make a huge difference in what actually you end up with. And that's where you come in, Joshua. At Magna Financial, you specialize in helping people manage international currency transfers smoothly and strategically. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Exactly. Thank you for the perfect intro. So my name is Joshua. I am a senior trader at Magna Financial in London. We have offices in Europe and also the UAE as well. We specialize, or I specialize, should I say, in helping American residents purchase and sell properties in Europe. So most of my time is spent thanking Mr. Trump for all of the currency fluctuations, and yeah, helping clients navigate that system. Currency, I feel, is often very overlooked in the property buying process. Sometimes what most people do, they will go onto Google and at the start of their search, they will search dollars to euro exchange rate, and they will base their budget off that particular exchange rate on the day. What they might not know is that the exchange rate moves anywhere from 0.5 all the way up to 2% on a daily basis. And so speaking to a specialist early is very important because it allows them to kind of work out a best case and maybe a worst case scenario, which is more accurate than going onto Google and basing their figures on there. On an annual basis, we trade over 5 billion in FX. And in total, we work with over 140 different currencies worldwide. Like I say, predominantly I deal on the Euro desk. So most of the currencies are US dollar, euro, and pounds. Because of the volume that we're transacting on an annual basis, the exchange rates that we have access to are much, much better than the general high street bank in America or across the world. A lot of the time, what banks will do is the transfer, but the exchange rates that they offer their clients are very poor, and that's where we come in. So we act like a bank, but we're not. We're more of a broker. Lots of different banks around the world against each other, pick the cheapest exchange rate, and on average, that saves our clients anything up to 5% on the exchange rates. 5%, it might not seem like a large number, but when you're buying for 100,000, just as an example, that's up to 5,000 that they could save for the same transfer when using the bank, which is very important. Everyone's requirement to currency exchange and situation is different, whether you're a cash buyer, whether you're waiting on a US property sale to come through first, or maybe getting a mortgage in France. Everyone has a different situation. We will hold your hand from start to finish, create a plan that works best for you, and do our best to help navigate the market, but minimize any risk with currency fluctuations. Like I say, the rates can move anywhere from 0.5 to 2% on a daily basis. And so it's very important to protect your budget and make sure that it's not costing you more money in the long run. In relation to security of funds, so we do actually have a US-based bank account in New York with Citibank. We're one of the only FX companies that have the licensing to do in all 50 US states, which means we can send and receive money from any of the US states. When clients send money to us, they're sending it to a US bank account held with us, with our company. So it's fully secure, completely segregated, and completely protected. When we receive funds from the States, generally it arrives next day, sometimes same day, but usually in the morning because of the time difference. And then for us to send money to France, as an example, this is usually done on the same day also. So if you have any urgent payments, usually from account opening to us sending the euros, it can all be done within the same day. To give you an idea of how quickly the exchange rates move, since January this year, so 10 months ago, the exchange rate was 13%. Well, there was a difference of 13% in the exchange rate between now and then in 8 months. A lot has happened since then, of course, but it just goes to show planning ahead, speaking to a specialist at the earliest stage is very important. This is an example of the savings available when using our service. The example is based on 1 million euros. As you can see with a bank, these rates aren't based on today. This is just a general comparison. With a bank, the exchange rate you might be looking at getting is approximately 1.22, which would equate to 1.2 million US dollars. With a standard online broker, or perhaps a broker that is maybe owned by a bank, which a lot of them are, you'd be looking at 1.205, which is much better than the bank, and that's 1.2 million. And then with a company like ourselves, because we're trading so much on an annual basis, it would be roughly 1.1875. So in comparison to the bank, on average, that's a saving of 3 to 5%. And in comparison to an online broker, not necessarily a specialist or a one-to-one specialist, it would be on average a saving of 2 to 3%. Of course, this varies, which is why we would suggest getting in touch at an early stage, just getting a budget and having a plan in place to protect yourself. This shows a couple of the banks that we work with here in the UK, which are obviously very well known. Barclays being an A+ credit rating, and also NatWest as well. Citibank are on there, not on this slide, but it just goes to show the type of banks that we're working with and obviously the rates that we can provide with our clients. This is where we're based. You can contact us below. Dubai is fairly new. I work in London, predominantly on the Europe desk. Probably a few years back, I would say Spain was number one, but as of recently, more and more Americans that we're finding are buying in France. And so eventually, maybe it'll be myself in a French office, who knows? But yeah, that's where we are at the moment. I'll now pass it over to Joel, so he can take over.
Thank you, Joshua. That was really enlightening. Now, if managing currency is one part of the I would say financial puzzle, taxation is definitely the other, because moving to France doesn't mean you leave your US obligations behind, especially if you're an American citizen or a green card holder, right? Joel, you will confirm, right?
I can confirm that, yes, that we always have a claw out on you.
So help us navigate to that often complex territory in terms
Not a
of
problem. Not a
cross-border
problem.
tax compliance for Americans living abroad.
Thank you, Frenchie. Thank you. Joel Agler, I just want to, before I introduce myself, just bring up one point that Joshua mentioned, just in terms of the relation of the dollar to the euro and the appreciation in the euro since the beginning of the year. So just remember that if you do sell a property in France, you can be hit with a double capital gain. One on the appreciation of the currency, and two on the appreciation of your property if you bought it, if you sold it for more than you bought it for. So just that's just something to beware of. Obviously, it can go in the opposite direction too. But since the beginning of the year, the euro and the dollar have appreciated, in inverse directions. Otherwise, then, bonjour, everyone. Joel Agler, a New York-based accountant. Hockhauser and Agler is the firm, and we strive to just give our clients the highest quality services and, ongoing service that we can. We focus on small businesses and individuals, and we just think that it's an advantageous situation for us to be in because we can be flexible, hands-on with, grassroots ingenuity. So to that end, I work in conjunction with Phil on U.S. citizens living in France, and we're prepared to help you navigate this maze of which very few of us understand sometimes at time. Everybody has a unique filing situation, and just have to understand that when you go over to live in a foreign country, as I mentioned, there is always going to be some type of a U.S. clawback in some type of a filing status here. And just because you moved to France for its cultural life, sophisticated life, family, work, healthcare system, you still have a U.S. filing obligation. And the U.S. system is based on worldwide income. So that's something that, we didn't write the rules on. We're just a messenger in that regard. Bear in mind that the U.S. taxes, because it's worldwide, are filed after the French declaration, and the French declaration or return is due approximately May 31. U.S. taxes can be extended up until October 15th, but if you do owe any U.S. taxes, and you could always use the prior year as a barometer, they are due April 15th. So it's important to us, even though you want to be, get a 2-month or a 4-month type of an extension on top of that, you still have to pay your taxes that are due by April 15th for the preceding year. I think Phil spoke on what entails being a French tax resident, 183 days in France, primary residence is in France, employment income is in France, and it's just the center of your economic activity. If you qualify, for that, you're a French resident, tax resident, and you're often taxed at a much higher rate than it is here in the U.S. It can be anywhere from 45% upwards to 55%, including surcharges, versus here, 37%. So, I mean, again, you're going there maybe for other reasons besides just, going into a low tax type of a haven. If you clear all those rules and the hurdles, then, we engage you to just get into a discussion with us on what you think your next step is. No charge for any type of consultations, and the prior year returns can often yield tax savings, for credits that maybe you didn't take. Few things to remember that U.S., if you have bank account type activity, financial asset type activity, which could be brokerage accounts, pensions, there are some low bars in U.S. filing requirements if you have those foreign bank accounts, 10,000 approximately. If you understood all this, then we can ensure that you'll pay the legal minimum for each jurisdiction. There are many intricate rules depending on your age, your compensation of your family, the type of income you receive, and the tax treaty. The tax treaties are basically instituted between countries to avoid any types of double taxation. So if you're paying tax to France, you would, on the same income, you would most likely get a credit in the U.S. The credit in the U.S. might wipe out your French income, but you still might have some type of a U.S. tax liability because France, as Phil mentioned, is not taxing everything, interest, capital gains, things along that line that are sourced over here. Again, rest assured, there's no double taxation on the same income, and the treaty helps you, to limit that. There is also something with self-employed people with Social Security taxes that if you are paying social charges in France, you can get a waiver on that with the U.S. There's an exemption also in the treaty where you won't be subject to the U.S. self-employment tax on any type of French income that you've paid. I don't want to go into the arcane here of nuances of taxes. I want everyone to know that if you haven't filed your U.S. taxes, there is a U.S. amnesty program instituted about a dozen years ago where, we can get you up to date and, without any types of penalties for late filing. Beware that if you really want to give up on your U.S. citizenship and really become an expat, there is a U.S. exit tax that they have certain thresholds that you have to meet. But if you leave, the U.S. will make you ante up at the gate. So, you pay your U.S. tax and then you're free not to pay anything in the future. I think that's basically it. I want to get some, questions and answers from everyone in terms of just, a unique situation. Feel free to put it into the chat or, the moderator will take the question. We'll try to answer as best as we can. Again, no tax professional is going to give you any type of an answer, unless it's something that's just totally black and white. So if you have to, you can always contact us. The contact information again is in the handouts, and you can feel free to reach out to us, and we can have an ongoing discussion about your unique situation. Thank you, Frenchie, and I think that's the end of my discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You're making up a new word because we're on Frenchly and I'm Frankie, and you come up with a mix that I love, calling me
Not a
Frenchy.
problem.
It's nice. I love it.
Okay,
Let's
not
take
a
a few
problem.
questions.
Thank you.
For you, Joshua, are US seller financed mortgage treated the same as rental income from an investment property? If not, how are they treated?
Sorry, I'm just reading the question now. 1 second.
And I think the question is for Joel.
Is it? Yeah, I was
Sorry,
going to say,
sorry, I thought you said Josh.
Yeah, yeah.
is
Sure.
it?
I could take it on a listen once again if you can read it. Sure, thank you.
Absolutely. Are US seller financed mortgage treated the same as rental income from an investment property? If not, how are they treated?
Any type, if it's a rental property that's in the US, then obviously any type of a US seller finance interest paid would be deductible. The same rule I think would be pertaining to a French rental property. You'll be able to deduct the French rental the interest against your French rental income.
I see. Question for Joshua from Robert. Wire transfers to the US ACH account. My broker will not send the wire unless the account being sent to is in my name and is my account. I found an FX company gives you their ACH info, but is not an account assigned to my name. For that reason, my broker will not approve the wire transfer.
Good question. So there's two options. So we do have named currency accounts. The named currency account is based in the UK, which is in the name of the client who opens it. So in that case, that would work perfectly fine. The other method, like I mentioned earlier, is when we open a US dollar account with Citibank, and that is via the company name. So in your situation, it would work having a named account with us.
Thank you. Question for Phil. What are the most common lifestyle surprises that new arrivals experience once they settle in?
Lifestyle. Yeah.
Surprises. Being
Oh,
an American arriving in France. What's the
yeah, yeah. And you're talking about livestock. Well, I suppose one major thing is how slow the French administration systems work. So, I'm taking this from a cultural perspective. I think, Frankie, they've moved from an American sort of culture, whether it's lifestyle there, and they're coming to France. I think I have a lot of my lovely American clients ask me, can you expedite my file? Now, I don't think the word expedite actually exists in French because there is no way of trying to quicken up anything in France, particularly an application for something. When we put in applications for first-time tax declarations or applying for healthcare, you can't track your application, So I think, one thing is quite archaic how the whole system operates. And I think secondly, I think the lifestyle is just, how the pace of life slows down to the pace of a snail, really. So, I think that would be the main, one practical thing, which is how quickly things work. And the second thing, of course, is just the pace of life in France.
Thank you. Another question for you, Phil. For those in our audience that are entrepreneurs, what is the most effective way to structure a company in France? And as a US citizen, is it easy? Do you help them along the way at Peter Johnson to do that?
Yeah, sure. I suppose that, yes, we do. And there's a difference between being self-employed and there's a difference between having an actual French company. And that's dictated mainly by, the level of income that you're going to generate through this activity. If it's over, say, 75,000, we're probably looking at creating, this is an annual turnover figure. If you've got an annual turnover predicted of 75,000 or more, we'd probably looking at creating a French company. If it's under that, then it may be that you start off as a self-employed person. So it's going to depend on your personal situation, and it's going to depend on your activity, and it's going to depend on the turnover that you're really going to generate. But you can do both things. But the key point to get right at the start is to get the right visa. So unless you're married as a US national, to a European citizen, then you need to get a working visa. And that takes more effort than just getting a holiday tourist visa.
I see. Joel, for those with investments or a business in the US, what are the key reporting requirements once they become French residents?
Well, there's a foreign bank account disclosure, and then there's also foreign financial assets if your assets, I believe, above 300,000 at the end of the year. That's US dollars. So there are filing disclosure requirements on that. Your US investment income would not be subject to French tax. It is declared, might push you up into a higher bracket, but that US tax is going to be taxable on your US return.
I see. Joshua, how early in the relocation process should people set up their currency strategy? At what point? When do they know that it's the right time?
Good question. It is virtually impossible to know when the right time is. Nobody has the crystal ball. If they did, they would be very, very wealthy. Our job isn't necessarily to predict where the market will go. It's more so protecting the customer against any adverse movements. So it's always handy to have an account open and ready for when they might need to make that first initial payment. But even at the earliest stage of just inquiring about properties is also beneficial as well.
Thank you. I love this one for Mr. Morrison. He said, I'm reading out loud. If a US citizen won the lotto here in Europe, how is that handled? And is it worth exiting as a US citizen to save on the taxes the US will want from it? I believe the Euro Lotto is tax-free from their standpoint. Interesting. That's the first.
I could take that answer. So again, that would involve having almost 5 years worth of planning to make sure you're up to date with all your US filings and your income. If it has not exceeded, I think it's a 200,000 average over the last 5 years, then you might avoid the US exit tax and be able to declare that lottery winning, by being an expat and not having any type of a US obligation on that. Otherwise, then probably you would not have a US tax because the French, if it's tax-free, the US is going to tax that lottery winning if you still remain a US citizen.
I see. Phil, your office is based in Béziers. Could you tell us a few words about your city?
Our city is remarkable. It used to be France's richest city. It was France's official oldest city. And then it went into sharp decline. And then over the last sort of 10, 15 years, it's had a remarkable recovery. And so it's got at its base wonderful architecture, which has been brought back to life again. The whole city's been regenerated, but in the style in an old, retro style way. So many events, so many activities, beautifully placed. An hour and a half from Spain, an hour and a half from skiing, 20 minutes from the Mediterranean Sea, and at the center of winemaking and plenty of history. So it's a lovely combination and just a city right on the up.
Well, you definitely love your city. We can hear that. What are the key differences, Phil, in administrative expectations between rural and urban French prefectures when it comes to residency paperwork and renewals? Is it different from Paris in other cities? The process, the time?
No, no, no. It's a real, as Robert was talking about, it's a lottery in terms of, who you're going to have dealing with your file at a particular local office. And, we can have, I don't want to online name particular tax offices or other offices, but, there's offices which are in big cities which have done, appalling work in terms of the length of time it's taken to process something. So, you know, what happens in France with local tax offices, for example, is that they move personnel around France. They don't let people stay in a particular tax office, for an entirety because they don't want people to get too familiar with local tax residents. So, you never know what year, what tax office or what administration office is going to be particularly bad. We know when it's happening and we can advise clients, say, look, we're having a lot of problems with this office, but there is no difference whether it's, Montpellier, Paris, or, Aix-les-Thermes out in the middle of nowhere. There's no real sort of real difference or a rule which governs whether rural or city is better.
Thank you. I guess the next one is for maybe the apartment, other than the standard French property taxes and copropriété fees. Also, could Magna Financial please talk about their fees or rates?
Shall I talk about the taxes, etc., and then maybe Joshua, you want to come in on the rates and fees and anything
sure.
else to add? So Um, it looks like, Michael's starting off as buying, a place in Paris as a non-resident. So the things he needs to be aware of, a lot of them he's mentioned already, but he's going to put an offer in. He's going to then go to signing a compromis de vente, and then he's going to wait maybe 3 months before he closes at the completion stage called an acte de vente. So he's going to pay a notary fee, which is like a property tax, buying fee, which is going to be around about 7%, 7.5% after the agency fees is taken off. So he needs to be aware of the notary fee and any other sort of self surveys he might want to get to do on the property. So the French will do a diagnostic, but he might want to get a builder in or another person in to check, the property in a little bit more detail. So after that, he's bought the property. Then, yes, he's quite right. He's going to have, as a non-resident, where it's a second home, 2 local property taxes to pay: taxe foncière, taxe d'habitation, and the person who pays those is determined by the person who owns the property on the 1st of January each year. You've got co-ownership charges, as he's talked about as well. You just need to make sure if it's like an apartment in a building, you need to check if there's any planned work already agreed by the current committee for the future. So that would be one thing to check. And then really after that, the local property taxes co-ownership, it would be if he's got a property worth than 1.3 million euros or more, then he's going to be subject to French wealth tax called impôt sur la fortune. So that would be quite key because he would have to pay that as a non-resident from the start. And I guess the final point is, when you come to sell it, obviously there's capital gains tax. And as a non-EU resident, then he would also have to pay an extra charge in order to get that capital gains approved by a particular fiscal representative. So I think he's got it all mainly in hand, but those are the main points. Over to you, Joshua.
Thank you. So in relation to opening an account and maintaining it, there are no fees or charges. When sending funds, there's also no fees or charges as well. The way that we make money as a business is the fact that we have a lot of banking partners, and the fact that the sheer volume that we're doing on an annual basis is generally where we make our money. As an example, I didn't mention it earlier, but if you are definitely buying. Let's say you pay a reservation or a deposit, and then the completion is in 6 to 8 weeks' time, just as an example. If you're worried about the exchange rates moving up or down, what we could do is fix the exchange rate for that period of time so that you haven't got to worry about the exchange rates fluctuating. That is very common for completion dates, anything over 4 weeks, I would say, because it just avoids or completely eliminates all risk involved in the market.
Very nice. And Joshua, for dual residents or individuals maintaining income in multiple currencies, what are the best practices for multi-currency account management? And how do you decide when to convert versus when to hold? I know, once again, you don't have a crystal ball, but how do you manage a multi-currency account management?
Good question. So a lot of the clients that we have are, buying properties overseas in France. And then from then onwards, they will have regular payments, whether it be from pensions or just general income, wherever that might be. We have a team of in-house analysts. Their job isn't too fun, but they sit there, they watch the markets, they look out for any economical results or speeches that might impact the rates, relay that onto myself, and then I speak with the client and give them all the information that they need to make a more educated decision. There's no right or wrong because there will always be a point where they perhaps could have got more. But as long as they have the information there, that's all we can try and plan for.
Okay. Phil, for those planning to purchase property before relocating, how do you recommend aligning the real estate transaction with the visa, the banking setup to avoid delays or compliance issues? What's the process quickly?
Well, it's not too much of a problem overall. I think it depends. If they're just buying a property as a non-resident, obviously there's no visa issues at all. I think if you're buying a property as a second home, as a resident, and even though you're thinking you might move into it in 5 years' time, etc., there's no real issues there. The main issue for non-residents is, apart from going through the sales process and getting all that done, is actually being able to catch up with all the local property taxes, for example. And that's where we can really help non-residents by sort of taking away some of the stress and being a reassurance to say, don't worry, you're going to receive this tax bill, but not until this date, in this particular year. And then when you do get the tax bill, we can get you set up online, and then we can manage your affairs quite simply as a non-resident. I have a lot of Americans, they come over, they get their visa, and when they purchase the house, they may be in the social security system or the tax system or not. It doesn't really matter. So you haven't got to stress too much about that particular point.
Okay, and also, Joel, for that specific situation, from a tax optimization standpoint, it won't make a difference?
No, the purchase or acquisition of a property is not a taxable event. So, I mean, I guess you're never going to time the currency translation. But again, I think as Joshua mentioned, you might be able to, fix it so you're not going to, lose out on anything in terms of just if the euro appreciates, it's going to cost you more.
Okay, how difficult is it for as a US citizen to open a personal bank account in France? What are the steps, and would it help? Of course it would. That I also have an EU passport. That makes it much easier. No?
I,
No?
yeah, I mean, we keep going around. Well, yes, maybe it might make the bank feel a bit more comfortable. We keep going around this problem, with people sort of coming over, because the problem is that the different banks in France sometimes have a slightly different policy, and then you're reliant on how the individual officer in the bank will see the situation. And what you have to remember against this backdrop is that these people working in a lot of the professions, whether they're lawyers or tax lawyers or people in banks, they don't really understand that someone can live in France without a social security number and without a tax number. They don't understand how people come into the French tax system because they've just been born with a social security number. So when I speak to our bank, for example, I've said, look, what is the situation? They say, if you're coming to France and you're visiting for a year, you're not going to get a French bank account, and you have a year and you go home. Don't try getting a French bank account in between. You might get a Revolut bank account or an online account, maybe. But if you've either bought a property in France, you are going to get a French bank account. And then if you're becoming a resident, then you are going to get a French bank account, but they might ask for, say, a US tax number or a US social security number, but you will get a bank account open. And there's Credit Mutuel runs something called Britline, which is an English-speaking version of Credit Agricole. And there's Revolut. A lot of people use Wise as bank accounts to kick them off.
I see. We have a few minutes, if it's okay with you, for a couple last questions. Joshua, I
Sure.
think you answered this one, but it sounds a little bit more technical, but I think you answered pretty much that one. For clients transferring large sums for property or investment, how do you approach hedging strategies such as forward contracts or limit orders to minimize exposure to exchange rate volatility over several months?
Yeah, exactly. So that would just be looking at the time frame that we have, any upcoming events, economical or political, whatever it might be, bringing them to the table, laying them out, and then going from there. Limit orders are great, depending on how aggressive you want to be. And then forwards, I would personally say for the bulk of the transfer are best because it locks that amount, so there's not as much risk. For businesses, so obviously we have two sides of the business. We help private individuals and also businesses as well. So that would be a separate matter and perhaps more in depth, I would say.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The last one for you, Phil, on a much lighter note. How would you advise people to integrate locally beyond language and paperwork?
Well, I think it's just trying to find a way of, I suppose, getting stuck in to some sort of local life. And I'm married to a French lady, and we've had two young daughters go through the French system here. And I guess, one thing we had to our advantage was not so much that Sophie was French, was that our kids were involved with something, i.e. school. So we naturally got involved in, school life and all the things which go with that as a parent trying to help out at school. So when we first came, then my wife found a note in a boulangerie saying they needed grape pickers. So she came back very proudly to say, I've got you a job. And she sent me off grape picking. So, that's an example where basically, if you're a language learner like me, which is not a book language learner or one of those fantastic audio things or an app, then I had to get involved by doing stuff. And I learned, my French that way. And also, it just makes you part of the local scene. And that helps with integration. And people, are really quite kind in terms of either encouraging you or helping you. And they're happy to have an exchange. And of course, when that exchange involves wine, then it seems the languages flow a little bit better, after 2 or 3 glasses of red wine. So I would say any opportunity you've got to do something, whether it's with a club, association, helping someone out, that is the best way of just getting involved in local level community integrating, and then people will just see you as another person and not as an American coming to France.
Thank you so much. I see that we have a special guest. Who wants to make the presentation? We cannot hear you.
I'm not on mute. Can you hear me?
Yes, now we
Yes,
can.
We can hear you.
yes, we can.
So my name is Pat. I was invited by Joel, and
Thank you for being with us.
I moved to France 3 years ago from New York. I'm sorry I joined late, but I actually teach a young lady English once a week. And so I had a rendezvous with her today. It sounds like it was an interesting program, so I'm sorry I wasn't here from the beginning. But I just to sort of reiterate something that Phil said, I think one of the most important things about trying to get integrated in France, in whatever community you're in, is to talk to people. And someone who is French had said to me, one of the most important things is to meet people and to constantly have a face-to-face with people. Like I think in the United States, people tend to send emails, send text messages, and there's no real face-to-face communication. And I think that's important here. And as Phil said, if there's something that you enjoy doing, try to participate in it. For example, I started going to a gym, and it's a very small gym with essentially a private coach. And everybody there is speaking French for the most part. And so I've met some people there, and I've actually started socializing with some people there. And even just vendors in stores or real estate people, like if you're searching for a property, you want to go to a real estate agent face to face. And you want to keep going back to those people face to face as opposed to emails, telephone calls, because people remember you that way, and you can develop a relationship with them and socialize with them. Um, I um, I think I've had some different experiences in terms of what people have said about like opening a bank account was very difficult because I'm retired and I don't have income in France. And people didn't understand that. And they kept asking me, well, what's your pension? And I said, I don't have a pension. I was self-employed. So people just couldn't comprehend that I didn't have somebody sending me money every month. And I said, well, I don't. So ultimately, and I am an EU citizen, by the way. So I don't know that that was really the deciding factor in being able to get a bank account. Because I went to several banks, and when they heard that I had no income, they wanted no part of my opening a bank account. Until ultimately, I just went to one bank and said, if I show you how much money I have, will you like give me a bank account? And actually, that's what persuaded them. So somebody took a chance on me, and so far it's
Money
been
talks. Money talks.
yeah, money talks, exactly.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you.
So I don't know, it's been a great experience. And I do wish that, I had been here from the beginning, and thank you for allowing me to just put my 2 cents in.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pat.
I really
Thank you.
appreciate you. It's the best way to end this webinar. Thank you all for joining us today and for taking the first step toward turning your move to France into a confident, well-prepared transition. Remember, relocating isn't just about changing countries. It's about creating a new chapter that reflects who you are and how you want to live. A special thank you again to our experts, Phil Rees, Joshua Baxter, and Joel Agler. Thank you, Madame, for sharing your experience. You will be sending you a replay link along with each speaker's contact details shortly. Until then, bonne chance in your journey, and we hope to see you soon on Frenchly.us and maybe next time from your new home in France. Good evening good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. À bientôt. Merci.
Thank you.